And the tool that the Lord uses to wake us up is the study of prophecy. In Selected Messages, Book 1, page 121, it says, "The revival of true godliness among us is the greatest and most urgent of all our needs. To seek this should be our first work. If our greatest need is for a revival, it means that we're spiritually dead, according to the spirit of prophecy." And in Testimonies to Ministers, page 113, we're told, "When we as a people understand what this book means to us," speaking of the books of Daniel and Revelation, "there will be seen among us a great revival." There's information in the books of Daniel and Revelation that bring about the final revival of God's people, and that information is the prophetic information that is identifying that a Sunday law is imminent in the United States. And because a Sunday law is imminent in the United States, if you and I believe that and understand the implications that that means our probation is about to close, then we bring our life into agreement with that truth, and there's a revival in our lives. And therefore we're prepared to stand during the Sunday law crisis. But part of the story of Isaiah is that not only are these people drunk, but they don't have any sight anymore. And having no vision allows them to teach, if not by direct voice, but by actions, that the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel, that the prophetic word is a sealed book. It can't be understood. And I know in Acts of Apostles that you can take this passage we read and say, well, this applies to Protestants outside of Adventism. But brothers and sisters, at this time period of the Sunday law, not only will the Protestants who continue to uphold Sunday receive the mark of the beast, but Seventh-day Adventists that uphold the Sunday law, that accept it, are going to receive the mark of the beast. We're reaching a point here in history where the judgment of the living is going to come to a close, and Seventh-day Adventists are going to demonstrate that their character will uphold Sunday sacredness as opposed to Sabbath sacredness, and therefore we must understand that prior to that time, in agreement with that, in a consistency with that, those people that are going to do that, if not openly, by their lifestyle, they will also teach that the prophetic books cannot be understood, because it's in the prophetic books, particularly Daniel and Revelation, that the information is that identifies where we're at in Earth's history and what we need to do at this time in Earth's history. And if we will not receive that information, then we're preparing for the mark of the beast. Great Controversy 594 says this: "The events connected with the close of probation and the work of preparation for the time of trouble are clearly presented. But multitudes have no more understanding of these important truths than if they'd never been revealed." Isaiah says it this way: "For the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes." Brothers and sisters, these things that we're dealing with in these studies, they may be unfamiliar and a little bit hard to conceptualize, but they're not really that hard. The overflowing scourge is the punishment that sweeps the world at the Sunday law. And part of the story, and this is the part that will be very touchy as we proceed on it, is that the Lord is going to purify His church during this time, and those that are most specifically identified in prophecy as being the ones that are going to receive this punishment are the scornful men that rule Jerusalem. And brothers and sisters, I'm not saying the church is Babylon, and I'm not saying that everyone that's holding a leadership position in the Adventist church is going to be lost. I'm just saying Bible prophecy doesn't paint a very pretty picture for the leadership in Adventism as we approach the Sunday law, and that gives us no room to be joyful or proud, because brothers and sisters, as lay people in the Adventist church, there's many things that we're supposed to be doing that we're not doing. How many of us have left the city? Sister White says, before this time, get out in the country. How many have taken our children out of the influence of the world? How many of us are practicing and sharing the health message? How many of us are entering into all the light that's been given? Testimonies, Volume 4, page 167 says this: "There is a limit beyond which He will no longer delay His judgments. The desolation of Jerusalem stands as a solemn warning before the eyes of modern Israel that corrections given through His chosen instruments cannot be disregarded without impunity. The overflowing scourge is identifying a punishment that follows the Sunday law in the United States. This is where the Lord sweeps His floor clean. This is paralleling the sweeping clean in William Miller's dream. This is paralleling Matthew 3:12, where it says, Christ's fan is in His hand, and He will thoroughly purge His floor and gather His wheat into the garner, but He will burn up the chaff with unquenchable fire. And this is a very solemn and serious presentation, and it only gets more so as we continue on into our next presentation, because we're going to show you, brothers and sisters, if you will see it, and there is a large possibility based on prophecy that we won't see these things. But if you will see it, we're going to show you in our next presentation that the structure that we call the structure, the corporate entity of the Adventist Church, will be swept away at the Sunday law in the United States. Has to be. If it was faithful, it'll be shut down for being faithful. If it's unfaithful, it will not have the spiritual strength to stand during that test. Friends, understand, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and I don't believe in building a ministry out of attacking the sins in the church. I know there's people that do that, but I can't back away from the truth that part of the testimony and prophecy is the condition of God's church. And we're told we will give a message more pointed than John the Baptist, which does not give us license to criticize and condemn, but it does demand that we're accurate. And Bible prophecy tells us that the condition of God's people when the overflowing scourge arises, when the Sunday law arises, when the mighty windstorm arrives, when the consumption that has been determined comes to Adventism. The condition of God's people at that point is that you can't see the genuine jewels and coins. They're so buried under rubbish, false doctrine, and false and spurious coins and jewels, the false brethren. They're so buried that you can't even see the true and faithful at that time. But when that time period arrives, the Lord, through His own ways and means, is going to sweep the false doctrine and the false brethren out the window of the church. And as you look closely at this theme in Bible prophecy, it is also identified that the main focus of the condemnation of God's people at that time is the leadership. And I'm not worried about, I'm not trying to attack any leaders or the leadership. I'm just trying to set forth what prophecy is identifying, because there is a necessity to understand these things correctly. At this time in Earth's history, each of us need to be developing an experience where we are dependent solely upon the Lord and no human beings, because over and over the prophetic scenario says we're not to trust in flesh.